Good morning, everyone. This is Teresa Foley again. So yesterday I read a little piece from my book, and I wanted to do the same today and offer a little more insight. Okay, so without further introduction, this is what I went through. It's not August 12th, 2019 currently, but that's all right. Tonight's date of February 7th, 2021 is much more significant. Today marks 2 years since my mental breakdown while closing at work. This will forever be a day that both terrified the living daylights out of me and forced me to finally take the leap of faith necessary to seek help and turn my life around. My shift began like any other. I clocked in and took my $10 bank before beginning my deliveries. Not feeling or acting my usual happy, sarcastic, and filled with endless energy self that day, I kept mostly to myself between deliveries and did my own thing. Keep in mind, I hadn't had the best night's sleep, which was my own fault. I had woken up to use the bathroom a few hours before my shift and check my email before lying back down. This proved to be the worst decision of my life, and I hadn't even realized it. Needless to divulge, I'd gone to work exhausted, though my inner enthusiasm hid this fact well. As the evening waned on, I went on my deliveries and completed my nightly chores dutifully. Now I cannot pinpoint the moment my delirium crept in, as I do not remember much from before or during its arrival. What I do recall and will never forget are the delusions I suffered. Each scenario played before me in my mind was of a family member or a friend who had taken their life. For any who might be listening to this, if you can't deal with my truth, you're welcome to stop listening now. For those who have been there themselves and will relate, please continue listening, my fellow warriors. I'm going to list and recount a couple of the delusions that I'm able to remember to the best of my ability. My mother's mom, my grandmother, was not her real mother. The sweet, loving lady she'd grown up with had adopted her as her own daughter after her real one had taken their life a few years after my mother was born. She had been silently drowning in heartbreak ever since the love of her life had left her and found another. In real life, my mom is not adopted, and there is a birth certificate to prove so. However, her father had lost his life at a young age to an accidental carbon monoxide poisoning while working on a car in his garage. One can note the subtle similarities, which are altogether frightening. My ex Joseph was becoming increasingly lonely in Seoul, South Korea. Though he had met many new friends overseas, I myself taught English in Huai'an, China for a few months. While teaching English, Joe found himself missing the ones he'd left back home, along with his family and myself. During our last conversation over the phone, I'd mentioned how I'd left Huai'an, China, and gone back home. Hoping to surprise his family and myself, Joseph booked the next possible flight to New Jersey from Seoul, South Korea. Unfortunately for him, he'd soon realized I'd landed in South Carolina instead, ready to begin the next chapter of my life with a clean slate. We'd broken up while both overseas, but promised to remain friends and had successfully, if only for a short while in reality. The news I'd done so without him and by myself proved too painful for Joseph to bear. He drove out and parked near the bay as we had countless times before and ended his existence a few nights later, unable to withstand his heartache. This particular hallucination never happened, or else I wouldn't be here. Yet, by some miracle, I am. The voices that spoke to me throughout the remainder of my shift, closing that night, was a stranger to my ears. I've since come to the conclusion that whomever was speaking was possibly God, one of his angels, or a guardian of an unknown origin sent to watch over me in my hour of need. I don't remember much else, only that at one point I'd been sweeping the floors, at times with the broom upside down, laughing, talking to myself, presumably with my cousin Matt, who'd lost his own life in 2015 to suicide, and pointing at my wrist at a tattoo I'd gotten a few years earlier in his memory. Noticing that I was clearly not okay, a coworker who had been closing alongside me offered to finish up mopping so that I could head home. I owe him my eternal gratitude, as his actions later saved my life. Upon counting out my tips, clocking out and leaving, I found myself sitting in my truck with my foot on the brakes as I shifted through gears. At one point in my hospital stays abstract, it was reported I'd been doing so for 3 hours straight. I'd gone to leave, but soon found myself again with my foot on the brakes and shifting through gears repeatedly. A short time later is when a police officer and a little while later an ambulance arrived. My concerned coworker had convinced our boss to make a phone call for my safety. The police officer asked if I was alright and whether or not I'd taken drugs. Of course, still lost in delusions, mind you. My response was perfectly clear. I told the officer that I hadn't taken anything and was clearing my system to maintain my CDL, as I had a physical coming up, and even though I wasn't using it at the moment, I wasn't willing to risk losing my credentials by failing a drug test. I'm able to laugh at this part now, since even though I'd literally lost my mind, my honesty was still very much intact, amusingly. While I don't remember my ride to the ambulance, to Tom's River Medical, or any examinations they performed, I do recall feeling time pass slowly as different events in my life flashed before my eyes, and discovered laughter helped me speed up time's agonizingly and excruciatingly delayed process. Still have no idea why this was, but it helped push me through each crazed, hysterical chuckle. The only other thing I recollect with amazing clarity was hearing the voice of my ex Joseph uttering to my other boyfriend John, I guess she truly did love me," which I now bitterly snicker at, because even before we dated, I always told Joe that I loved him, even when he never once said those words to me. When I finally awoke the next morning, I found myself in the hospital, alone and scared, wondering what the hell I had done, and doing my best to act normal. I could read on, but I want to save some more for another time. To date, I've had 4 mental breaks. One of them, my sister had passed away when she had her crash years ago, and she came back to visit me to keep me from taking my life. And I don't know why, but in another my delusion was that heaven was a Taylor Swift concert, which I guess was supposed to bring me comfort, because my grandmother and I used to play blackjack, and whenever we got 22 or 15, we would always say Taylor Swift. So when I think of that, it makes me think that my grandma was trying to comfort me. I'm going to stop rambling for now, but I hope someone's listening and that this podcast is helping you guys. God bless.